I mean, if you've never read snarky heroine who goes on her healing and self-discovery,
Yeah, do you ever look at any of the theories?
No, and I say no in like the most loving way. I mean, if you've never read any of my books, I'm not even sure why you're watching this right now. If you haven't read Crescent City yet, I guess they're like a mix of urban fantasy, paranormal romance. Like it's like a fantasy world, but a modern world, so it's not our world. And then most of my books, it features like a kick-ass, snarky heroine who goes on her own huge journey of healing and self-discovery and self-love. And then there's just like a lot of hot dudes and hot sex. I don't even look any of my family members in the eye anymore. Parents have made the mistake of, promising to read everything I ever write. And I've told them, like, Mom and Dad, like, that's over now. Your promise is over. I don't want you reading.
Yeah. Do you ever look at any of the theories?
No. And I say no in like the most loving way. I have 3 apps on my phone: the New York Times crossword, solitaire, and mahjong. And that's it. At the end of the day, all I want to do is like play solitaire for like 3 hours straight, like watch Bob's Burgers and unplug my brain. I am not like lurking around on the internet. I am usually trying to just like stay in my creative bubble. And then every now and then like a friend will text me and be like, LOL, look at this crazy theory.
I want to know about creating Crescent City, because in your other books you have these like beautiful old worlds, and then in this one you have this like modern city with technology, and it's so different. So what was that like for you?
It was like a years long process, and honestly one that's still ongoing, as I'm working on this series. But I grew up in New York City. I'm now back living in New York City. But I think growing up in the city, being young in the city, just inspired a lot of this book. But the idea for it actually came to me on an airplane. Like I think I was on tour for maybe Air of Fire, one of the Throne of Glass books. It was a long time ago. And I was listening to music and I just like heard this random piece of music and I saw the scene at the end of the first book, a bombed out city and like Bryce there and like desperate for help. And I saw the like gate with the little dial. And as this piece of music played out, like randomly, I just saw that moment when like Danica's voice like comes back from the dead, and like Bryce's moment of utmost despair, she hears someone that she loves reaching out to her. And in the middle of the plane, I just burst into tears. And I had no idea who these characters were, what this world was. I knew it was a city, a modern city. And I just, for the whole flight, listened to that same piece of music like a serial killer again and again and again, until I had a clearer picture of what was going on in that scene, and that I knew that Bryce existed and that she had a best friend named Danica who was dead, and that there was like a hot angel dude, like kind of dead in the background. Thought like this would be my project for fun, that I would write like just on the side, because like I couldn't categorize.
Oh yeah, this definitely looks like a side project.
When Throne of Glass was starting to wrap up, I was thinking about like, what do I want to write next? And I kept returning to this project that I had no plans initially to publish, my fantasy version of growing up in New York. And like, it was just like, so much of my experience living in a city and loving living in a city all went into this. And I just was like, this is it. Like, this is the story I want to tell. Jump ahead many years later, and here we are.
How do you keep track of all of the details about the worlds that you build? Like, do you have a Bible that you've been building, or is that something that you had to like retrofit?
My publisher has an official Bible that we frequently reference, and I am blessed with an editor who is a genius, who remembers details and lines from not just like these books, but my other series. I think in Blame and Shadow, I had one line and we were doing maybe copy edits, and she was like, this line was familiar to me. I think we might have had one very similar in like 3 ACOTAR books ago. So like she helps me, and I have a terrible memory. And maybe I have a bad memory because I keep all my stories like occupy like all the space in my brain. Sometimes I'll be writing a scene where some character will pop in and like I don't remember their eye color, like so and so's eye color, like, and I'm like, you know, like those are consistency details that you know, we can easily reference and look up. But I also keep a bunch of notebooks. But I'm not like Tolkien, like sitting around with my like handwritten encyclopedia.
You touched on Hunt a little bit. And one thing that I was thinking about is that we don't know a ton about Hunt's like backstory, his like origin. So one thing that a bunch of readers wanted to know is if we are going to find out more about his parentage and all of these things in the next book.
You will learn more about Hunt and where he came in the next book. And as for his well-being, I make no promises. That would be a spoiler for the next. I mean, I will say that when I was working on Sky and Breath, and my editor and I were thinking about like what's the most like horrible thing that could happen to Hunt at the end of it. Like I knew how I wanted this book to end, but I originally had him getting his wings chopped off again. But then like my editor was like, what's even worse than that? And I was like, oh well, for Hunt it would be getting the slave tattoo. So poor Hunt, he's in for a journey.
So we also want to know, and many readers did too, will we learn more about the Autumn King, such as whether there's a connection to the Autumn Court?
Yes, you will. When I first had the idea for this series years ago, like I kind of knew who Bryce's biological father, provider of DNA. He's not a father in any way. Like I knew who he was, but then in the process of actually writing and editing these books, he's become one of my favorite characters to write, mostly because he is so horrible. And he's someone that is capable in some small way of doing the right thing, but he like just doesn't. And he's just a fucked up, like horrible person. And pitting him against Bryce and against Rune, like my sweet baby. It sounds strange to say it's fun for me to do that, but as a writer, it is a lot of fun to put such opposing characters who cause each other such trauma and drama, like, you know, just to put them together in a room and see what happens. But then I also just love like when Bryce really sticks it to him in Sky and Breath. So it's so satisfying for me to like see a woman like getting one up on like, you know, a douchey like patriarchy, like loving, like just gross ass dude.
There is a headcanon in the Sarah J. Maas fandom that when people make the drop, they can choose how their first light is used, and that Rune chose for his to go towards powering all the vibrators of Crescent City because he always puts a woman's pleasure first. Can you confirm, deny?
Okay, I had not thought of this. I love this idea. I mean, I don't know how, like, now there's the world building part of my brain is like, well, who would Rune have contacted? Is there an organization in Crescent City that's like women?
Where you like sign up for where it goes?
Yeah, like, and like he would totally have been like, that's.
Is it a sponsorship thing? Like, do they contact him?
Yeah,
we would like you to sponsor our vibrator line with your first light.
This is so creative and like beautiful too, and I feel like even though it's like not in the series, like obviously, like I'm like, this is like something that Rune totally would do. Now I feel bad about where Rune is. Like now that I'm thinking about sweet Rune, I'm like, oh God, like,
oh no!
Yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Oh God. How much of your writing process is trial and error in building this stuff? How often do you have to go back and like completely redo things? Do you have to kill darlings? Like, how does building a world like this work in like real time?
Sometimes I will write a whole draft, realize it's not what I want. I had a book that I worked on recently. It's not Sky and Breath, but I'm debating whether I should mention this or not. So when I was working on Flame and Shadow, I was going through some shit. That's all I'll say on that front. But the first draft I turned in, I didn't like it. Like I wrote the whole damn thing and I turned it, and I was so excited to sit down and write it. And I turned it into my editor, and I was just like, meh about it. But I turned it in, and I just knew I hadn't found the right story yet. Like, even, almost 200,000 words later, I had not found the right story, and it just wasn't good enough. Like, it was not good enough. And as much as I talk about being a profoundly lazy person, I am very intense when it comes to my writing. Like, I always want to be putting out the best possible thing. And if I know it's not my best possible work, like, I will not put it out there. So I threw that draft in the garbage. But so we did like maybe 2 rounds of edits, and it was not coming together. And again, like, I had some like other things going on, and that like I was like not in the right space. And then I just was like, I need to throw out this whole thing. I need to start over again. And over the course of like 4 or 5 weeks, I wrote a brand new draft. And I was in like the zone. I finally found that story. I'm not afraid of the hard work and like of saying that something's not good enough, because I know that that's an opportunity for me to do better. I have to completely love it and believe in it. And sometimes that means throwing out 200,000 words and starting over again. But then I wind up with something that I'm really proud of and really excited to share with you guys. The book I'm working on right now, like yesterday, I spent the whole day the other day writing a whole scene, and it was like 20 pages. And by the end of the day, I was like, this is dumb.
Oh no.
Not good. And so I just was like, nope. But I mean, I saved it, but I don't even think it's good enough for like bonus scene material. But it's all part of the process.
When Aelin closed the word gates in Throne of Glass, she got glimpses into different worlds. And you had said in the past that you were really deep in the creative process of Crescent City when you suddenly had this idea of like Reese and, the like worlds crossing and stuff. Are you some crazy genius who just like all of these little breadcrumbs came together like in your subconscious? Or was it like intentional all those years ago?
I am not a genius in any way, shape, or form. Okay, so Josh took the kids out this afternoon so we could film uninterrupted. But if Taryn, my son, was here, he would be parading in and going, I'm Sarah J. Mask. So there's like no genius in this household. Like, there's no genius. It's like, my kids keep me humble. Honestly, Taryn is obsessed with Taylor Swift. It doesn't matter what I do. Like, I will never be Taylor Swift. And so like, I will never be cool to him. And I admit, like, I've always loved her. Like, I think she's an incredible like creator and like businesswoman. And I just have so much like respect for her. But now that Taryn is obsessed with her, like, we've only listened to her music in the car. That's it. Like, all summer long. I know now, like, I thought I knew all her songs, but now I really know all her songs. Anyway, that's a long tangent to say that in the eyes of my son, the only creative genius in the world is Taylor.